So far we've talked about what transdisciplinary practice is and some of the reasons for transdisciplinary practice. But in these courses we are aiming to develop the skills, the knowledge and the ideas that are necessary for transdisciplinary practice and to be leaders of transdisciplinary teams. So in this section we're going to think about what some of these transdisciplinary skills and competencies and attributes are. These ideas, the ideas in this section come partly from the literature and partly from consultations that we did with stakeholders, both from universities and from government and from non-government organisations and from business and from the community sector. When we think about what's required to work effectively in transdisciplinary teams, one of the things that's emphasised most strongly is that a lot of it is about what's called soft skills and attitudes rather than specific technical skills. So these include things like being humble enough to know that we have something to learn from others, even people from parts of society that generally have a bit less status and power, but who have knowledge about their own circumstances, have knowledge about their own environments, their own regional settings, and of knowledge of their communities. A second skill that's identified is that people need to be curious. And they need to be interested to learn from people who have very different perspectives from their own disciplinary perspective. A third skill is that people need to have really excellent listening skills. And this links to the fourth skill, which is that you need to have good active listening skills and then check that when you're talking to people from other disciplines to yours or from other societies or who have a very different perspective to yours, that you check that you are understanding people correctly. You need to have an openness to new vocabularies. So every discipline tends to have its own set of terminology, and then people in the real world have a certain way that they talk about the experiences of their lives as well. And so we need to be willing to let go of some of our own disciplinary vocabulary and to make the effort into understanding some of the ways in which people from other disciplines and other sectors of society are talking. We also need to be emotionally able to cope with things that challenge our current views. Okay, within our disciplines, we have certain perspectives and priorities and commitments of the discipline that we're very familiar with, but other people may have very different priorities and different ways of looking and talking about things. And we need to be open and not feel threatened, if possible, when ideas that are very familiar to us are challenged. And finally, people need to strongly value teamwork, and in particular teamwork that includes a diverse range of points of view. Secondly, there are a number of skills and competencies that you need to develop which might relate to your specific discipline or are additional technical skills. Okay. So one of the first things that's important is that you need to be able to talk about your own discipline and the ideas from your own discipline using non-technical language and explain it to people who don't have the same background in education that you do. You need to start thinking about the understanding and the implications of your discipline for wider community problems and for the everyday life of the people in the areas where you work. You need to have an understanding of applied and action-oriented research. Even if you are used to working in very primary research or very laboratory-based research, you need to start to expand your vision to think about, okay, how can we apply this into practice, and how can we assess and continue to improve and learn about the system that we use to apply our research knowledge. And you need the ability to find connections between ideas from different disciplines or different parts of society. Okay? So many of these skills in this column relate to the ability to ask yourself, what does my discipline and what does my research mean to farmers, to women living in the community, to people who've been displaced from one country to another country, to government officers who are trying to manage programs in an area, to a wide range of stakeholders. Okay? And to keep on asking yourself, what does this mean, and how can I explain the important insights and knowledge of my discipline to this wide range of people? When we think about what is required to be a transdisciplinary leader, we need to consider all of the things that we just talked about being a good transdisciplinary team member, but there's also some additional skills that are required. So first of all, people need to develop skills in group facilitation, okay, and some understanding about how to help people who come from very different backgrounds to speak up and to make their most effective contribution within group discussions. Secondly, you need not only excellent active listening skills yourself, but you need the ability to help other people to engage in active listening and to detect where some people in the group may be being left behind because they don't understand, and maybe you need to ask some active listening questions on behalf of other people in the group also. You also need some experience and skills with at least some participatory development or participatory action approaches, as we talked about before. So, for example, maybe you know some methods about participatory action research or agricultural extension or co-creation. And it's important that you have a good understanding of some of the underlying principles of participatory research, participatory problem solving, participatory community development, participatory industry development, and so on. You also need the ability to help team members see connections between different ideas and to try and draw these different ideas together so that we can begin to identify solutions to complex problems that connect the ideas that come from different disciplines, such as your disciplines of agriculture, global health, gender studies, and so on. So we also finally would want to look at some of the things that are required and some of the skills and attributes that are required to be a transdisciplinary researcher. So all of the things that we talked about for being a transdisciplinary team member, plus you need to be willing to work on research questions that are oriented towards society needs, not just focusing only on what your own interests and priorities are. You need the ability to use a wide range of research methods that go beyond the common practices in your discipline. So even if you commonly work in laboratory science, you may end up needing to develop skills and understanding of social research methods. For example, how to work with farmers, how to bring about change in communities, and so on, or economic research methods, and so on. We need to recognise that the end point of the research and the purpose of the research is more than academic articles, and that when we create knowledge in transdisciplinary teams, we have a responsibility to share that knowledge to a wide range of stakeholders and to involve them in interpreting that knowledge and thinking about how to apply that knowledge. And finally, as transdisciplinary researchers, we need to have a co-creation mindset throughout the research. That is, we need to focus right from the start on working together to solve complex problems rather than academia coming up with what it thinks is a solution and then trying to sell or promote that solution to other parts of society. So what we're going to do now is to ask you, and the staff who are there with you doing this training will talk through this with you. We're going to do an activity where you look at these transdisciplinary competencies that we've talked about, and you'll be asked just to assess where you are at the moment. Okay, have you had any experience at all of these things? Do you think you're already well developed with these things? And then I'll also be asking you to think about 3 things where you might have had positive experiences about transdisciplinary practice in the past, and then 3 things from these competencies that you think might be challenging for you to develop, or that you might think might be challenging as you experience the courses over the next few weeks.